So, okay. So we want to talk about, folks, good news, bad news, if you want to look at it that way. Tomorrow the day starts at 5 a.m. So at 5 a.m. we turn on all the bells and the whistles and the alarms. And no, you can sleep all day if you want. That's fine. But those of you that want to see the whole process, the pilot is scheduled to come on board around 5 o'clock. Sometimes being Panama, it's a little bit late, but pretty much the canal works pretty much according to the clock. So if you want to experience everything, I would suggest getting up early. It is Panama Canal Day. So for many of you, this is what you came for. It's a magical time, I can tell you that. When you're out on deck and you're watching the sun gradually start to get light and then the sun come up, it is really quite magical. You'll see the pilot boats and some other boats bringing on the line handling people come out to the ship. It's your cruise, do whatever you want, but I will be starting about 5 a.m. If you want to hear the commentary, it will be on your cabin TV. You can turn it on, stand on your balcony. We've actually had, I've got pictures of people coming up on deck in their PJs and robes to be out there, and then they're going to go back to bed, I guess. I don't know. But it'll be in cabin TV. It'll be in the open decks and up on in the Tahitian lounge, maybe in the Horizon Court. I'm not quite sure of that. But it's up to you, and I'll have commentary. It won't be constant all the time. It'll be on and off. One of the treats of getting up early for folks from the Northern Hemisphere is seeing the Southern Cross, which unfortunately for us is going to be behind us. But when we're doing a southbound transit, east to west, it's right above the entrance to the canal. It's just spectacular on a clear morning. You're coming in, right above there is the Southern Cross. Unfortunately, it's going to be behind us. So the canal is run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year since 1963. In 1963 is when they introduced the lighting. So it runs around the clock. The timing of when we actually move is going to depend a little bit on the nighttime convoy. Typically, Panamax ships, at least to date, have only been handled during the daylight hours. We're not a Panamax ship in this case, but at night they tend to group together a bunch of the smaller ships, mostly small freighters together, and then run them as a kind of convoy through the canal, and it's a little bit more efficient. A few facts to ponder while you're up there waiting out on deck. Over 1 million vessels have used the canal. In 1914, which was the first year the canal opened, 1,000 ships passed through. In 2014, 14,000 ships transited the canal. You can make reservations up to a year in advance. You pay a preferential reservation fee of $25,000 to reserve a slot. If you want to guarantee daytime transit, which we do, that's another $30,000. So just for our advance reservation, no tolls, no fees, just the reservation cost is $55,000 for this ship. Now that's you pay that when you make the reservation. It's non-refundable, so you better be there to claim your spot on time. If you don't have a reservation, you just want to show up and wait. There's a couple things that can be done. There is a bidding process. So say you got a freighter, you come in, you want to get through, you don't want to go all the way around the Horn, but you don't have a reservation. So there's a process. You can go online and it will say, we have 6 slots, and here are the times the slots are open. And you can say, okay, well, I'll bid $40,000 for one of those slots. Let's say there's only one slot, so I'll bid $40,000. The guy over here says, no, it's more important for me. I'll bid 60, and I'll be 70. And so it could go up to $100 and some $1,000 just to get that spot to go through, depending on how urgent it is. Now, why didn't that freighter maybe make the reservation when we made it a year in advance? Well, a year in advance, we know exactly where the ship is going to be. You're having a freighter, you don't know exactly. Sometimes some of these freighters, they got to pick up, then they go here, and it's not that they can program it exactly to be there on time. So last year, in November, the wait was up to 11 days. Now that was mainly because there was a water shortage. They were doing some work in the canal. That reduce the number of transits. Usually there's about 15 to 20 ships right now who are out there. They're just sitting waiting for a slot to go through the canal. You'll see them in the morning when we come in. That you just sit there and wait. It's not like the crew can go ashore or anything. You just sit there and wait and hope that your number comes up. So 326 million tons of goods move through the canal each year. That's the equivalent of about 40 million elephants, in case you're counting, or about 100,000 times the weight of fuel to go up to the moon. So it's an enormous thing. It's not really built around cruise ship passengers. I know sometimes on ships I get people that say, Richard, why are we waiting? Don't they know we're here? Well, they do, and frankly, they don't give a damn. You're not really, the cruise ships aren't really the business of the canal. The business is moving cargo in these big containers through. Now, cruise ships do get preferential treatment. I think some of that's just, let's get them out of our hair. I'm not sure, but they do get preferential treatment. So they do try and get us through as quickly as possible. We'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. So this is your cruise. You can get up or you can do like these people did. This was on Infinity. I actually took this picture. We were in the canal, in the lock. This was these guys' dream of a lifetime. Their retirement, for which they'd saved up all this money. What were they doing in the lock? Sound asleep. I couldn't believe it. So whatever you want to do, it's your vacation. Escape completely, do it. As we enter the canal, it's going to be dark, but you may be able to see, if it's clear, the skylight of Panama City in the distance. Panama is a very exciting, vibrant city, kind of a Miami on steroids, also described as a Singapore wannabe. And although we're just barreling through the canal and not stopping, I do hope that on another trip you will come back, take our the 2-day Panama Canal experience we have, or just come down and stay for a couple weeks. Come visit me on my farm. But it is an exciting, exciting place. Now, on the starboard or right side of the ship, you'll see what's called Amador. That's a 2-kilometer or 1.25-mile long causeway that links 4 islands that were there in the beginning, and then some of the spoil that they took out of digging through the Continental Divide, they dumped in there to connect those islands, so it became known in U.S. days as Fort Amador. Amador was the first president of Panama. That's why they named it that. On the other side of the canal was another fort called Fort Sherman. So they had kind of the equal representation. Today, it's a long causeway. There are a lot of restaurants, clubs, discos, a marina. People love to go out there and walk their dogs or run or jog or just sit and watch the city lights. It really is a pretty, pretty place. It's probably going to be too dark to see most of the skyline, depending on how cloudy, but that is the Panama skyline. Looking across right in the front here is the Amador Peninsula, and that was taken from the ship going in. Now, when cruise ships call at Panama City, they have to anchor out and tender in. And a lot of the itineraries will often call this, instead of calling it Panama City or Amador, they call it Fuerte Amador, which used to be the name way back when. So for years, there's been talk of actually doing a cruise terminal on the Pacific side, but nothing has happened. In November, Panama President Juan Carlos Varela went to Miami to meet with this guy. Who is who? Who's this guy? This is the president of Panama. This guy is Mickey Arison, who is the CEO, head of all of the Carnival Corporation companies. So basically, they were discussing the possibility of doing a new terminal over here that would get away from that having to tender in. So no one gets this far unless the cash is in the Panama Canal account. No credit, no checks, no credit cards. So how much do you think it cost? I hear 200. 200. Who will give me 225? 225. 225. I hear 225. 225. 600. Okay. We could go on that forever. So let me show you how the whole thing works. The basic toll is based on the number of berths, passengers and crew berths, whether they're occupied or not, at $134 per berth. So I figure that if we're using 1,190 9 berths for this ship. That's about $160,666 for the tolls. But then, like an airline ticket, you have the price of the ticket, and then you have all the fees you got to tack on. So these are all the fees that have to get tacked on to that thing. The advanced transit reservation, the daylight transit, sanitary inspection. The sanitary inspection is a funny thing because frequently some little old guy will come on with a bomba. What do you call bomba? A spray tank on his back, okay? And he's coming on to check for bugs on the ship. Have you seen any bugs on the ship? If we see a bug on the ship, literally the alarm goes off on the bridge, and it's a full crew alert, and then the guys come in their white suits and tanks, and they kill this bug. So, but some of the ships that come through here are really absolutely appalling. I mean, it's appalling that people can live that way. And so they go out and they check that out. So there's a lot of things, tug services. They don't charge extra for pilots. That's nice of them. But so the fees can add up. In our case, the fees are going to be about $75,808. So when I add all this up, I come up with $236,472 for us to go through the Panama Canal. Now, I've always had tough time getting the actual figure because it's done out of California, and then that's sent to the port agent. It really doesn't pass through the ship. But our captain is a good guy, and he's very cooperative with stuff, and he did find out. And the captain said, more or less, it's $180,000. So I thought, well, how is he coming up with 180? And this is downloaded off the toll thing online, and I couldn't figure that out until I kind of played with the accounting and realized that if you add up the advanced transit reservation fee and the daylight transit reservation fee, you back that out of this number, because this is not paid at the time we go through. This was paid a year ago. Okay, so it's in a different accounting system. Add that in, and I may have put in, because I'm used to bigger ships, I may have put in a little too much for the line handlers and too many wires. But we come out to be about the same. It's right about 180,000. But we do have to add in the cost of the reservation. So that's what it's going to cost us, guys. And thank you very much for your business. We hope you come back. So what you'll see early in the morning, you'll see the pilot boat come alongside, and the pilot, now with a tech guy, of course we all have to have a tech guy, will climb on board. There'll be some other officials with him. There'll be additional boats that will bring out a little bit later the Panama Canal line handlers. They're the guys that actually handle the lines on the ship, and there are various officials and the port agent. And since our photo team will be getting off to take pictures of us and record the transit, they will be getting off about the same time. So the pilot climbs on board. He's carrying what has traditionally been called the orange box, because at one time they were all orange. This is the orange box, in this case the yellow-orange box, but it has a computer connection that gives the pilot critical information. Like in this case, we're 1.8 kilometers off the entrance, the actual entrance to the first lock chamber. So this links him directly with marine traffic control. The marine traffic control is where every ship that is in canal waters or waiting to go through the canal is being monitored. It's kind of like a navigation control tower. Everything that's being done is controlled from this place. And these at the top are various cameras that they're looking at the locks, and they can see what's going on. Now, your friends back home on www.pancanal, one word, pancanal.com, can see these same screens on their computer at home, and they can watch us going through the canal. It'll be a little bit hard, maybe the first lock, Miraflores, but by the time we get to Gatun, the sun should be out plenty, and they should be able to see the ship. So if you want to get out there and flash your friends back home, with your sign that you're going to make, of course. You're not going to flash them with anything else. But you can do that, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. I'll show you what it looks like. So before we enter the canal, the ship has to be signed over to the Canal de Panama, And it's the pilot, not the captain, who's going to be calling the shots. To preserve the chain of command, the pilot tells the captain, who then gives the order, and it's passed down the line. But the pilot is in charge, and if the captain doesn't like that, he can take his ship and go around tip of South America. It's fine, okay? So once the pilot comes on board, and he'll come on board down here, the canal from deep water to deep water, the end to the end, is 82 kilometers or 51 miles long. So it'll be a long day. Typically, it'll take a ship like this maybe 9 hours, maybe 9.5. Just depends on things. Things don't always run according to schedule. Sometimes there's a big bulky bulk carrier in front of us that it takes longer for the water to drain out, or there's one point where some of those big bulk containers, bulk carriers can get caught on a lip that runs under the gates. But so sometimes it takes a little longer, but generally things go pretty much according to schedule. On Amador Peninsula, we'll pass by the Museum of Biodiversity called the Bridge of Life. It was opened last year, as I mentioned earlier. I think it was designed by Frank Gehry, who did the Walt Disney Concert Hall in LA and the Experience Music Project in Seattle. It's really an amazing, amazing museum, talking about Panama's role as the bridge of life between linking the continents together. It's only been open about a year. And I think I told you the story that when it was under construction, I was on a ship and we're coming through, and all you could see were the steel girders sticking up for this whole configuration. And one lady came up to me and she said, "Richard, what is that? Did a bomb go off over there or what?" I said, "No, that's going to be our really fancy new museum." But anyhow, not long after that, we will see the Bridge of the Americas looming up ahead. For many years, the only way to cross the canal, you have a country that's divided in two. The only way across was by boat, and then the U.S. put there's a swing bridge we'll see as we enter into Miraflores. That bridge could be used, but only when there wasn't a ship in the chambers. And then they put in a ferry that was called the Thatcher Ferry, and eventually in 1962, for a cost of $20 million, they put this bridge in called the Bridge of the Americas. First it was the Thatcher Bridge, then it became just the Bridge of the Americas. In 2004, a second permanent bridge, Centennial Bridge, was opened. We'll pass under that as we make our way through the canal. And there's now another bridge that is under construction as well. Unfortunately, the Bridge of the Americas can't handle the amount of traffic going into Panama City. There are about 3.7 million people in Panama. About 2 million of those live in Panama City and the surrounds. And there's a big community called Chorrera up this way where everybody commutes into Panama to work. They have typically a 2-hour commute bumper to bumper coming in. So there's just not enough traffic on that bridge, and it can't handle enough. And more importantly, it is too low for the current mega ships that are going to be going through the new locks. So the plans are to scrap that. It's going to be replaced by a new bridge, and that's being called the Fourth Canal Bridge. The third one we'll talk about, it's under construction now on the Atlantic side. But this is called the Fourth Canal Bridge. It'll be higher, it'll carry more traffic, as well as the third metro subway line. That metro subway line is being financed by Japan. Will cost about $1 billion for the third line. So the new bridge will make it a whole lot easier for the 500,000 people who commute in from the suburbs every morning. And how many of you have served in Panama at any time in your careers or lived there? Usually it's a whole lot more. What used to be Howard Air Force Base, which when we're coming in, you got the Amador over here, and then I said there was Fort Sherman. A little bit further up was Howard Air Force Base, okay? And then just about Balboa, it was Albrook, another Air Force base. So Albrook has really become a giant shopping center. The runway there is still our national airport, but in order to provide access to this big new bridge, Albrook is going to disappear, and that airplane traffic will be moved up to Howard. So Howard has now been renamed Panama Pacifica. It's a big, very big development, basically a brand new city. When the Panama got the turnover of the fort there, they wisely decided not to do anything with it. They kept the runway maintained and everything, but they didn't do anything with it. And they've waited till now to begin to develop it as a big planned urban city, and it's really going to be fantastic. It also has a free zone, which makes life interesting. So on the other side of the bridge, we'll pass two big ports, Balboa Port and the town of Balboa, which actually was the main center of life during the U.S. occupation of the Canal Zone. Balboa, the area itself, was created with landfill from digging through Culebra Mountain during the creation of the canal. This port is owned by a Chinese company, and most of the big ports at both ends of the canal are owned by Chinese port companies. Big companies have ports all over. Now, the question I always get is, does China own the canal? No, they don't own the canal. It's Panama's canal. Are they running the canal? No, they're not running the canal. With very few exceptions in Panama, you've got to be Panamanian to work. So they're not, the Chinese are not running the canal. But we do have a huge Chinese community in Panama that's been there since before the canal. 50 years before the canal, they brought a lot of Chinese in to build the railroad. So in the area where I live, most of the little mini supers are run by Chinese families. We call them China stores. And some of those families have been here going back to pre-canal days. What's interesting and what's frustrating is because the Chinese have been in Panama so long, if you go into a Chinese restaurant, likely, along with whatever Chinese entree you get, you're going to get fried patacones. Very Panamanian adjustments to the cuisine. So I'm used to Chinese food from San Francisco. Panama Chinese food has gotten corrupted through the centuries, but apart from that, the Chinese are very present there. They just have seen good investments like these ports, like they buy U.S. treasuries. They've got money to invest, and they're looking for places to invest it. So the canal is opened by Panama. Any profits, now running about $1.3 billion a year, go to the government as a direct check written at the end of the year. Here at government, thank you very much. And it's an amazing situation, really. So up on the bridge during this process, it's very undramatic. Just a team of professional, very qualified people doing what they do well. Every captain is a little bit different, but and the Canal Authority requires that the captain himself actually be on the bridge when the ship is going through the canal. He can't be off dealing with emails. He's got to be on the bridge. Every captain's a little bit different. I remember one captain, I walked in at 5 o'clock in the morning, and in the morning like that, the bridge is dark because you don't want to mess up their vision, and you go through this red room to get in, and it's very... And as I walked in, I could hear this crunching under my feet, and I had a little flashlight, and I shined it down, and I could see it looked like pieces of broken glass. I thought, well, maybe during the night a window blew in, and it was the window that, instead of cracking, you know, it shatters like a windshield window. And I looked, the windows all looked in order. So I said to one of the guys up there, I said, "What's with all this on the floor?" And he just rolled his eyes and pointed to the captain. He said, "Ask him." So I did. This was a Italian captain. And he said, "Well, it's an old Italian seafarer custom that before you go through, you throw rock salt, just like you use in your driveway for ice. You throw rock salt on the bridge to assure a good, safe transit." Now, since that ship had been dead in the water 3 times as we went around the world, it's probably, and I'm sure nobody mentioned the dead in the water part to the canal authorities as we went in, but it did work. We got through, no problem, so you might try it. Okay. So here's where, when we're headed in now with the new situation, we are going to have a choice. If we went here to the left, or port side, we would go in through this, which is the new entry to the new set of locks. So we'd go in this way. The traditional way, and the way that we'll go, is up here, which is going to take you up to this point. That is Miraflores Lock. Then on this side is Miraflores Lake, and up over here is Pedro Miguel, and way up here you can just barely see the Centennial Bridge. We're going to go not this way, but this way. When the ships have a choice, or when you have a big ship, the big ship will go this way. Now, what's interesting about that is this is 3 levels, 1, 2, 3. But Miraflores is only 2 levels, and then you go through Miraflores Lock, and then you get the other level. So let me see if I can get, we'll come back to that later because I don't know where that slide is. So this is what the new locks are going to look like. This is all, again, gravity fed. There's not pumps or anything, but these will go into the water saving basins. The new lock chambers will hold 65% more water than the original locks, but they will use 7% less water per transit because of this system of these water-saving basins. In the end of the transit, the water, just like now, is all going to go out to the Atlantic. But it will be reused several times, and it will actually use less. We did have a little problem when they first turned on the water. These are the locks, the new locks. And they had planned to test these things out, and as part of the testing, guess what they found? Water just pouring in where it wasn't supposed to. This is cement, and it's supposed to be dry, and now I got all this water coming through. So that has delayed it a little bit until they figured out what was the cause, and then figured out how they were going to address the cause. That threw us off a little bit, but that's why the opening will now be scheduled for June. But it is working, and the pilots are going to start testing. They leased a new Panamax vessel so that they could actually run the test. So here's the difference. I talked about the difference of the locks, and this is the traditional lock leaf design, originally designed by Leonardo da Vinci, used in canals around Milan in the Middle Ages. So that's what holds these things together is the pressure of the water. But these have to be occasionally floated out. They're much more difficult to maintain. The rolling gates are going to be faster, they're easier to maintain, and this big thing will actually just roll out and cover the opening. You can see some guys standing up here just to give you an idea of the size. These are the kind of gates that they use in places like the Kiel Canal and that like. But these gates were actually fabricated in Italy. They had to be shipped across the Mediterranean. They specially designed ships to be able to do that. They landed in Cologne here. They were traveling on things that looked like giant caterpillars. And they stored them here in Cologne until they were ready. They'd offload them here and just put them into position. And some of you who've been through in the past year or so may have seen those. So the rolling gates roll. They're slid into position. These gates are huge. The tallest one on the Pacific side is the equivalent of an 11-story building. Once they got into Panama, the gates for the Pacific side, of course, had to be transited across the canal. So this is a picture of the gate. I took actually this from Island Princess, one of the gates for the Pacific side being taken across the canal. What I want to point out to this is, I think this morning I talked about the traditional culverts big enough for a train to go through. Okay, this is the new lock. There are 2 culverts. This is the main culvert that brings all the water in. Then it feeds the auxiliary culvert, and then that feeds all of these little, you can't see them very well here, but there are little inlets along here on the sides of the walls of the canal. So this is the main culvert. The new main culverts, this part here is big enough to carry 2 trains through. So they are huge, or as Bernie Sanders would say, huge, okay? But it really is kind of an amazing, amazing thing. So we're going to bear right. We're going to head into Gatun locks. Even if the new locks were open, I think we'd prefer to be in the original locks just because they're a whole lot more interesting because of the size and the history. And unless a cruise ship is too big to get through there, I predict in the future we'll continue to do that. And you notice in the 2017 Princess brochure, it talks about we'll go through Miraflores, and it names the locks like that. So this is what it looks like when we're heading into Miraflores. actually, we're coming in from the other side. No, we're coming in from our side. Okay, here are the swing bridges that used to go across the locks and make it possible for people to go across before Bridge of the Americas. Now they're just sitting there. This is the Miraflores Visitor Center. And then up here is one of the mountains. Over here would be Fort Clayton. That's what we'll see as we're going in. Here's another picture, same deal, headed into Miraflores Lock. Now, right up here at the front is this famous arrow. As we approach the locks on the center wall, you'll see a giant red and green arrow. This was used to communicate visually with the pilot and indicate a number of commands. It was very important before you had all this radio and computer stuff. Some of the times I've been in here, it has not even been working, but if they are working, it will use it. So the arrow, how the arrow is positioned will give you different commands. So this command says, not ready, stand well clear of the lock, be prepared to approach on signal. This says the locks are getting ready. It's about 10 minutes you're going to go through. This one says, okay, you enter the right side. This is you enter the left. So because, however that arrow is positioned, it gives the command, or in our case, kind of confirms it. So as we approach the locks, you'll see this tiny rowboat with two people making its way from the center wall out to this giant ship. Can you see it in that little circle? Okay. These guys are actually bringing out the line, the first line, to the handling team on our ship. The canal guys are already on Ocean Princess, and that line will be used to drag the lines into the locomotives or mules. Now, they've tried different ways of doing this through the history. They've tried shooting this on board. They put out a few eyes in the process. So really just the most efficient way and the most cost-effective and the best way is to put these two little guys in this rowboat to come out to these great big, very sophisticated technical ships and bring the line out. And you'll want to watch for that when we're going into the canal. Now, the locomotives have always been nicknamed mules, not because animals were ever used, but just as a way of honoring the history of canal waterways. Each locomotive cost about $2.3 million, weighs about 55 tons, runs up and down the center wall using a cogwheel. The ship makes its way through the canal under its own power. It's not being drugged. It's going through under its own power. It's not being towed, but the locomotives have three very essential functions in the original canal. The first is to keep the vessel centered. Okay. The second is if the vessel would lose power completely, the locomotive could pull the ship out of the lock and not keep it stranded there and holding up the process. And as we all know from high school physics, an object in motion tends to remain in motion. So if the ship should lose power or for any reason or for whatever reason be unable to reverse its forward motion, then the locomotives can act as a braking force on the ship. The new locks, no mules, no engines, just a tug at both ends of the ship. This has worked in computer modeling. It works in the simulator, but the pilots union is questioning how well it will work in real life, which is why we have this 3-month period when the canal pilots will actually be testing this on a real live leased post-Panamax ship. And hopefully there will be no problems. So when we're in the locks, then sometime look back towards Ancon Hill. You'll be able to, hopefully, if the weather's good, and I expect it will be at that time, to get a glimpse of the Panama Canal headquarters building. You'll see these old swing bridges from 1942, and you'll see the Miraflores Visitor Center. Now, unfortunately, when we get there, there may be the maintenance guy opening the doors, but there aren't going to be any people, but because it's very early, okay? But sometimes I've been through, we're coming the opposite direction, and it's the middle of the afternoon. There are all kinds of people standing up here. I actually did a convention here, and we took the people out and had dinner that night up here, and it was the best thing. It was a real fancy dinner, and the ships are going through. And then the next day, we chartered two of the ferry boats, took the whole group through the canal. They were the American matrimonial lawyers. i.e. the divorce lawyers. But they like to be called matrimonial lawyers, not divorce lawyers. So now I know we're all making posters to flash at the camera when we go through. At Miraflores, I'll point these out, and at Gatun, they're what are called communications towers. They're painted red and white. That's where they're taking the pictures that are going to be on the blog, on the www.pancanal.com. So just so you can see how easy it will be for your friends back in Australia to see the pictures of you going through the canal. This was actually the world cruise of Dawn Princess, mostly Australians. We had a blast, especially when we were going through and in the afternoon, and our people were we'd been celebrating a lot, and the people on the Miraflores Visitor Center had been celebrating a lot, and they were going back and forth, and it was great fun. But anyhow, they thought they were going to flash their posters to the people back home, and this was the picture. This is actually off the website, and that little red dot, there's a red pixel someplace right about there. That's me. So just don't expect that they're going to see that picture too well. But they will get a good picture of you that you can take home as a keepsake. So for the ship, the maximum beam for the original lock chambers is 106 feet or 965 feet in length. Has a draft. The maximum draft is 39.5 feet in tropical fresh water. Since, of course, the locks are operated by fresh water. Each of the old lock chambers is about 1,000 feet or 304 meters. The width of each lock chamber is 110 feet or about 33.5 meters. Ocean Princess is 594 feet or 181 meters long, and 84 feet or 25 meters wide. So even though some of you have been ordering 2 of those special rare chocolate desserts, we should be able to fit through okay. These are the new locks, the new lock complex. On the Pacific, it'll be called the Cocoli locks, and on the Atlantic, it's Agua Clara. The new locks are going to be 110 feet or 35.5 meters wide, 1,000 feet or 304 meters long. So there's a problem here. Yeah. Yes, there is. But this is a good representation. You can't see it because I put this over. This is a good representation of the different sizes of the ships, what the size of the ship in the new lock will be and what it is in the old lock. I think I said the original lock is actually 905 feet, not 1,000 feet. And this one I think is 1,000 feet. But anyhow, you get the point. So when I do the bigger ships like Island Coral, it really is a tight squeeze, and we usually ask the people to lay off the extra desserts until we get through the canal. Tugs are standing by, which may be used as needed to nudge the ship into position. Frequently with the bigger ships, particularly this time of year, we get strong northern winds blowing, and the ship kind of acts as a big sail. So a lot of times we need the tug on one side to kind of help nudge it into position. The gates were originally operated by a giant gear assembly. One of those gears is on display beside the Gatun locks. I'll try and point it out. A 50 horsepower motor was used to open and close the lock valve leaves. Today it's a 15 horsepower motor operated by hydraulic arms. At the center is the control tower. That's where the lock master controls the lock operation. I don't know if we're going to drag out the old man playing in the canal. He waxes eloquent about this old system, which actually has been kept kind of as a museum piece in the lock towers. But how it's done now is it's controlled by a Microsoft design program that allows the lock master to control everything by computer. This is our IT guy there checking out the systems. Interestingly, Bill Gates, when he visited, he has a really good blog. He and Melinda have a really nice blog. And on his blog, he said, visiting the Panama Canal is one of the 10 things in the world that everybody should see. These are a few other high-powered visitors, the president, and who's the guy at the bottom? Zuckerberg. He got all dressed up for the occasion in his good gray T-shirt. So, you know, how the canal works, we just raise the ship up. The main water flows in and out of these main culverts, and this is a picture that shows, you can see the culverts at the bottom. Because they're spread out like that, there's no turbulence. You won't know that we're going up and down until you look on the side and you see things, you see our position relative to other things, but you don't feel any sense of turbulence or anything like that. So this is what I was talking about, the problem in Miraflores. So how they work the fact that you're coming in to Miraflores Lake, you're 30 feet below where these people are coming in. They built this great big dam, and they have a separate access channel here, which is actually 30 feet above where the ships are here. So what you're going to see, and as soon as they get, this is a representation, but this is what it will look like. You'll have the ships like ours down here that will sail out of Miraflores, will be in this lake, which is 30 feet below this channel for the bigger ships. And then after there, just before we get to the bridge, we'll meet up together and use the same piece going across. So when we get there, we're into Culebra Cut. We'll see Centennial Bridge. It was opened in 2004. It's the second bridge across the canal. Also carries traffic from the Pan American Highway. The west tower is set back a little bit to allow canal widening, and it's designed to withstand the earthquakes. It had to be high enough to clear the canal by 262 feet, or almost 80 meters, to allow Titan. Titan is the floating crane built by Hitler and acquired by the U.S. after the war to be able to pass under the bridge. Now, we should be able to see Titan a little bit further on. Titan is what's used to lift up those giant gates and float them out. The steel gates, the old gates, lockleaf gates actually are hollow so that they will float, but they have to be lifted out, and that's what Titan is used for. Centennial Bridge is in the part of the canal known as Culebra. This was the most difficult, daunting area to build. It's called because it cut through Culebra Mountain, took 9 years, moving 100 million tons of rock. Cutting the mountain down from 210 feet to 64 meters, not the whole mountain, but down to get it down low enough to do the canal. And I mentioned this morning Lieutenant Colonel David Gaillard. He was the guy in charge of this, and a couple of these things I'm just going to rush through. But sometime tomorrow, probably when we're in Culebra Cut, I want you just to spend a few minutes thinking about these people who managed to move mountains and accomplish what was thought to be impossible. And I'd like you also to remember that in the canal, the combined American and French efforts, 500 men lost their lives for every single mile that you will travel tomorrow morning. There are a lot of areas in Panama that are very geologically unstable. Culebra Cut is one of them. So there's been continual cutting back, trying to improve visibility, trying to cut down on landslides. Gold Hill is now trimmed down so much that it doesn't look like a canal, but it is like a hill, but it is the highest point along the canal route. I'll tell you tomorrow how it got that name. And then if you look at the starboard or right side just after Gold Hill, you'll see Renacer Prison, meaning rebirth, and that's the simple nondescript prison where Manuel Noriega lives today. You also see the Panama Railway along there. The railway today is the lineal descendant of the Panama Railroad. Most of the original route of the railroad is underneath the canal, but the railway today is a very profitable operation, not because of cruise traffic. There is one passenger train that runs between Colón and Panama City, goes from Panama City to Colón in the morning, then comes back in the evening. It's mainly for business people going to the free zone. But when there are ships in port, they sometimes sell tours on it during the day. But the round trip for businessmen, I think it's about $32 round trip. But the main part of the rail operation is moving containers from one side to another. So what happens if a ship comes in and the containers are stacked too high, so it obstructs the view for the canal, they offload some of the containers that are the problem ones, and they put them on the train, and it's over waiting to be reloaded on the other side before the ship gets there. And that has become very, very profitable. After the prison, you're going to see the place where the Chagres River enters the canal at Gamboa. This area gets 200 inches or 5.1 meters of rainfall a year. The tremendous flow of water down this river is essential to the canal operation. This is an interesting bridge to cross because it's a 2 lanes. One lane is the railroad and the other lane is a single traffic lane. This is a good place to actually catch glimpses of the railroad. But there's 2 great videos on YouTube, which you really should look up, that feature this bridge. One of them, a freighter was coming up the canal here, and for whatever reason, the mechanism to the rudder broke. So the pilot had no control over the ship. And the ship was headed directly toward this bridge. No control, no way to stop it, and they tried to reverse engines and stuff, but the forward motion is continuing. So just about very, like from here to the bar in the back, the captain then ordered the anchors to be dropped. And you see all this in the video. You see the anchors going down, and that ship came within 1 meter. It's an incredible picture, 1 meter of taking out that bridge. The other video that features that bridge is the canal's only been closed 3 times in history. Once, very early on, they had a massive landslide. Second time, just before the U.S. invasion. And the third time was that weekend we had a rain. It was just an incredible amount of rain. There were big islands floating down the Chagres River. Bigger than this, almost the size of the whole ship. Island floating down with big trees. And you see somebody got a picture of one of these islands with these big trees coming down dead center into the bridge. And those trees were just snapping off like toothpicks. It's an amazing, amazing thing. So there's so much water that can come down here, and that has been a problem. That's why a sea level canal would not have worked for another reason, is they didn't have any way to get rid of all the water that was coming down through the river. Just up the road is a 5-star Gamboa resort. This is a view from the canal from the top of the observation tower at Gamboa. This is tight, and I'll talk more about that tomorrow. That's also the home of the dredging operation. The canal spends about $150 million every year just maintenance dredging, nothing to do with the expansion of the canal. You'll see this strange looking thing. These barges actually drill holes where they put dynamite in the holes and then blow it up to loosen the earth underneath to be able to deepen the canal. Then we enter Gatun Lake. This is a great place to have that special breakfast on your patio. It really is a wonderful place. They're named after one of the little towns that was flooded here. What you see look like islands are actually the top of mountains from when this was all flooded. It was, at the time it was built, the largest man-made lake in the world. Now it doesn't even make the list of the top 30 man-made lakes in the world. But that is a great time. You'll see people kind of take a nap or play bridge or go to the spa or something like that. It's kind of a rest time. Some people think when you go through the canal you're going to see all these animals. Self-respectable animals are typically sleeping when we go through. They're not like a theme park where they pop up on cue. But you'll probably see the frigate birds. They like to fly over a lot. You'll probably see and hear the Amazon parrots. They're like gangs. You never see one. You see about 50 of them. But they are pretty when they fly, and they have this iridescent green as they kind of tilt into the green, and they're really pretty, but they're very, very noisy. And we have caiman in the canal. We also have crocodiles. And I'll tell you, when we leave Gatun Lake, that's where frequently we will see crocodiles in the water. So keep your eyes open for those. One of the most interesting islands is Barro Colorado, which has been home to the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, locally called STRI, since 1923. Been untouched the whole time the canal has been opened, and it is a center where scientists come from all over the world to be able to do research and stuff. There are animals, big animals on some of these islands, jaguars. They've done projects on Barro Colorado where they've set out cameras at night to record them and do a census of them. And these guys can swim between the islands, and they may be cats, but they can swim. Barro Colorado is also home to these little guys, aguati. They're nicknamed the Snickers of the jungle because they're at the bottom of the food chain, something to get for a snack. There are 19 of the original navigational lighthouses throughout the canal. Many of them are really just of historical interest now. More important for navigation today are the range markers that you'll see all over the canal. As we're sailing toward Gatun Locks, if you look off on the port side, you'll see the top of the spillway gates of Gatun Dam. Just creating that dam was one of the great engineering achievements of the canal. It's amazing. We'll talk about that. So just to orient you, this is Gatun. We're going into Gatun Locks. Over here will be the entrance. You'll see an entrance. That's the entrance to the new Agua Clarita Locks over here. You can't really, there's a mountain in here, or a hill, so you can't really see in there. About all you can see there is the entrance, and then you'll see the exit coming out up here. This is Gatun Locks. Here's Gatun Dam over here. There is a little place over here. If you come back, there's a nice new observation place over here where you can see the operation going on there. There's an old lighthouse there. It's named El Faro, which in Spanish means the lighthouse, just like that ship that went down. You'll notice when we go into Gatun Lock, there's a whole lot more space out on the deck for people who want to have the best viewing part. So there is no one best place to be. Just move around the ship and you will get the best view. There are some places where you'll see double sets of locks. That's a protective thing. If a ship manages to lose control and go through the first set of locks, then you've got the second set of locks, hopefully to keep from draining the whole system. Something else you can look for on the corner of the outside wall as we enter the lock complex, you'll see what look like giant tires. These are called the bumpers, just like bumpers in a pinball machine, and that's designed to help the ship get past that corner without digging a big hole in the ship. Nobody wants to bring the ship back with a hole. There is an observation platform here, and if you look carefully, I'll point out where the giant original wheel was used to open and close the lock gates, and one of the original old mules. You'll see a lot of people. By the time we get there, there'll be a lot of people there. Down here, you'll see these guys in the circle. They are ship photographers. Our guys are going to be out and we'll be taking pictures of you as we go through. So the key thing is to move around. The view you get is different wherever you are. Don't be locked into one place. There is no one best place. The people who get the most out of this experience are the people who move around. It's really exciting if you meet up with another cruise ship in the locks and you yell back and forth, and that's really cool. So a couple things to watch for as we leave Gatun Locks. There's a little bridge there that's retractable that they use to take some commercial traffic to go on the other side. It's not a very big deal, and you generally have to wait a lot. And then you'll see all the water rushing out as we empty the things. Then we're going to be heading out. This is the area that you can be on the lookout for crocodiles. This is the French Cut. I mentioned this morning. This is the only thing left from the French days, this little inlet, and it's called the French Cut. You'll see that. And then over here, you won't see this. This has changed a lot, but this was what's called the American Cut. This was the part that was dug out in the 30s for the American, over here, for the, this is flipped. The whole picture is flipped. Yeah, the whole picture is flipped. No, here's Gatun Lake. Okay, we're coming in this direction. Okay, as we're coming out of the locks, then here's the French Cut. When you come down here, you'll see this will be the entrance to the new Atlantic lock complex, which is built in here. But this part here is what was dug by the Americans in the late 1930s, then had to be abandoned in 1939 because of the war. But that has been reused and enlarged to be part of the complex now. You also see construction on the third bridge over the canal. It was begun in January. is now expected to be hopefully completed sometime around the middle of this year, maybe a little bit later. This will be a girder cable-stayed bridge that will carry 4 lanes of traffic. Then we're out into the breakwater, and I'll finish on this. The Bay of Limon will pass through the breakwater to the open sea. The breakwater itself was another engineering achievement, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Also, these are the tallest mast lights in the world. So you're going to see one slice of Panama. I hope that you'll come back to see more. Throughout the day, tomorrow, starting at 5 a.m., I'll be talking about stuff as we see it. I'll be out and about in my bright red shirt, and happy to answer any questions that you may have. This will not be the day right after Panama. It was when I made this. We're going to have to do a port talk for the Netherlands Antilles, Curacao, before, and then we're going to do with Colonel Rollins the day after Curacao. So please be watching for that. Have a good day, get a good night's sleep, and hopefully we'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Okay? Thank you very much.